into listener-sponsored, commercial-free 99.5 FM, WBAI New York.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. What an interesting, crazy week that we have had. Today, the big news, obviously, all across the country, there are marches going on, events, rallies, sit-ins, informational pickets. Abortion rights activists have, finally, the outrage, the stuff that I've been saying, in the streets we need to be. More than 380 marches are planned across the country. Washington, D.C., a big one. Chicago, Los Angeles, Austin, all across the country. And in New York, tens of thousands of women and men shut down the Brooklyn Bridge. Like I said, as part of the nationwide Bands Off Our Bodies Day of Action. And look, these protesters, what I love about New York is protesters with the pots and the pans and the noisemakers marching through, shutting down the Brooklyn Bridge through downtown Brooklyn into lower Manhattan to Foley Square. This is something that should be happening from now until they stop. Daily, I think. There's a point at which the outrage, the anger cannot just be, well, we did something a day ago. This has got to be something that is ongoing, and this is what they're building. This is why part of the march in New York is, everyone's going to this welcome village where there's a call to action. They're doing the day of action, but they're also building that organization. They've got informational booths. They've got opportunities to get involved with local groups who are going to build that local power. And this is what I've been saying for a very long time has to happen. Individuals, workers, the working class of this country has to find their power, has to find their organization, has to find their voice. And sadly, what's happened over the last 40, 50 years is corporate America, the wealth class of this country, has broken up our unions, has destroyed that portion. And I've been saying, look, we gotta grab that back. This is part of this. And I got an email a couple of days ago that just sent me kind of into this weird tizzy. The email subject line was, overturning Roe is not a single issue, but the first step to far worse. And I'm going, first step? Where have you been? This is not the first step in the class war. This is the next step. It's a big one, but it's the next one. And there's going to be another if we don't stop here and now. And this is where, you get into this. We can't be divided in these moments. This is where we're all in the fish tank. If you will, the old Knights of Labor, a concern of one is a concern of all, which then morphed into an injury to one being an injury to all. This idea that this isn't my issue. Abortion isn't a 55-year-old white guy's issue. It really isn't. But it is the next issue that the wealth class of this country, the zealot class of this country, wants to shove down our throats. And it's one of these things that, I go back to the Pastor Niemöller quote. I mean, this is one of those moments. First they came for the trade unionists, and I said nothing because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the socialists, and I said nothing because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the Jews, and I said nothing because I wasn't a Jew. By the time they came for me, there was nobody left. This is that scenario. Because, look, I've been saying this stuff for a while. This class war has been going on for now a couple of decades. And I would argue goes back, at least, 20 years to the 22 years to 2000, with the decision by the Supreme Court then to not count the votes of we the people in Florida. Because 5-4 decided, it would be injurious to George W. Bush if we actually counted the votes. because they couldn't decide on a way forward. They couldn't decide on a remedy to what had happened. And what had happened was a whole bunch of shenanigans that the wealth class had pulled. And again, you look at this and you go, bad decision from the Supreme Court after bad decision. So when I saw Clarence freaking Thomas. Now remember, Clarence Thomas, the guy who got Long Dong Silver into the congressional record, talking about infidelity and because, who could forget his long, lengthy conversation with Orrin Hatch back in 1991 over Long Dong Silver and his favorite pornography. But, Clarence was at this event down in Texas and being interviewed by John Woo, by the way, which is just priceless on its own merits. But the quote that's going around about the leak is that, it's an unthinkable breach of trust. He said, when you lose that trust, especially in the institution that I'm in, it changes the institution fundamentally. You begin to look over your shoulder, as you should when you're doing the wrong thing. He said, it's kind of an infidelity that you can explain it, but you can't undo it. Yeah, I think Clarence talking about infidelity, it's kind of like Donald Trump, talking about the decline of marital fidelity, or Denny Hastert lecturing about pedophilia. Yeah, I'm with you there, Clarence. Yeah. But this is the thing that's interesting. He goes on to say, we've never done it before. It's never happened. You would never visit Supreme Court justices' houses when things didn't go our way. We didn't throw temper tantrums, he said. He said it's incumbent on us to always act appropriately and not repay tit for tat. I find it interesting he uses that phrase. The guy who got Long Dong Silver in the congressional record. But here's the weird thing. I love how conservatives always take this high road kind of, we're better than that approach. When things didn't go our way, no, we didn't protest in front of justices' homes. No, we didn't do that. No, when things didn't go the way anti-abortionists wanted it to go, what did they do? Oh, that's right. They blew up clinics. They murdered doctors. They threatened women. No, that's what they did. They didn't peacefully assemble in costumes like they did in front of Amy Coney Barrett's house. No, they didn't dress up in cute little Handmaid's Tale costumes and march around singing songs. No, they blew up clinics. They didn't have signs out in front of Brett Kavanaugh's house, a handful of people who were handing out flyers. No. They murdered doctors. That's what they did. No, they didn't write cute little messages on Susan Collins's sidewalk. Oh, please, Susan, support the Women's Protection Act, please. They didn't write it in chalk and have her call the police on them. No. They threatened and harassed women. And when women wanted contraception, they called them sluts. You think about the whole Limbaugh thing. No, they did far worse. And this again, I come back to this as an old white guy. And it's disgraceful what we've allowed to have happen over the decades, over the centuries in this country, to name the group. But this is the time now to say, look, at some point, everybody's in the Shark Tank. At one point or another, we're all going to be the flavor of the month. And the Supreme Court, this is where I've been struggling with this for a very long time, because this Supreme Court has been bad for a very long time. And the right has understood the importance of the Supreme Court much longer than the left. The Federalist Society that's been in place for decades understood the power. They groomed the Kavanaughs, the Gorsuches. They groomed these people right out of college and created these little corporatist culture war drones And they pushed them through, and they politically made them front and center, where the left doesn't really do this well. So the Trump legacy is going to be clear. This Supreme Court that, and again, her email, we cared about her emails, and we didn't like her. But you know what? That nasty woman that everybody, nobody seemed to like, she was right, man. She was right on every single point. And because of a portion of voters in this country who didn't like her or didn't, look, I didn't necessarily care for her that much, still voted for her, didn't like her husband at all, knew where the Supreme Court was going to take us, knew we were going to be here. So am I surprised that we ended up with Janice? That was one step, a couple of steps back, when this court decided that consumers don't have rights at class action suits and forced people into arbitration agreements. Were consumers aware and marching in the streets? No, we just took it. What about workers? When they made class action suits for workers basically illegal and forced workers into, you could no longer sue. Now you've got forced arbitration in the workplace. Did we argue? Did we march in the streets? No, but we should have been. When Janice hit, we should have been shutting this country down. Every one of these death of 1,000 paper cuts, when the voting rights was destroyed, when when the Shelby County decision came down, we should have been shutting things down. Because an injury to one is an injury to all. And again, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't affect me today. It's coming. So I want to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. If you've got a thought on this issue, especially this. I mean, as we speak, there is a huge rally going on in the streets of New York and across this country as people are passionately talking about why this is important. And personally, I don't want to see us return to the ugly old days where poor and working class women and families are put in a desperate position. Because understand, this is all about creating desperation and poverty. This is all about making a pliable working class. This is all about good, cheap labor. And I go back to Tom DeLay. You may remember the Hammer from years past. He was talking to a group of religious zealots, and his anti-abortion spiel was, if we had all those babies, we wouldn't need those immigrants. We wouldn't need any of those immigrants because we'd have cheap labor right here. So when you hear Amy Coney Barrett talk about a domestic supply of infants, like it's some kind of something you go and pick off the shelf, which is what they really want. They want an environment where rich women can go and pick and choose what the poor women can't afford. It kind of makes you go, wow, what kind of a world do the political and zealot elites envision for us? The people who run things, not our politicians, they're pawns in this. And they're pawns that we can use if we were just smart enough to stand together and push them. And this is where you go back and you read about the organizing of the 20s and 30s and what our grandparents and our great-grandparents' generation, what they built and what they demanded and how they built it. I can't imagine what my grandparents would say about this moment we're living through as they watch their legacy being dismantled, as they watch all of their fights being reversed, as they watch the 20th century being undone, as they watch the progress that took us from desperation. Because understand, the good old days of the 80s and 90s, not the 1980s and 90s, but the 1890s, 80s and 90s, those were not good days for working people. Life was hard. Life was brutal, especially for poor and working class people. That's the world they want to take us back to. The days where if you're desperate enough and hungry enough to work in poverty conditions for desperation wages, well, that's your right. It's not really your right. It's something you have to do. But hey, you've got the liberty to do it, the freedom to do it. That's the world they want to take us back to. Love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. If you went to the march or if you're there, I want to hear from you. I want to hear what's going on. Quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1968. That was the day that workers across Paris joined students in a citywide general strike. College students had begun an occupation at the famed Sorbonne University earlier that May. These students were protesting what they saw as governmental repression in post-war France. A story by NPR marking the 40th anniversary of the protests described the situation in France, where women could not wear pants to work and married ones needed a husband's permission to open a bank account. Homosexuality was a crime. Factory workers could be fired at will. The news on the single TV channel required governmental approval. And the overcrowded education system was authoritarian. The students protested French leader Charles de Gaulle and the police. The addition of workers to the protest greatly increased its scope and impact. Paris and much of the country ground to a halt. President de Gaulle was able to weather the protests and keep his political power. By the end of June, most workers had returned to their jobs, but the country would never be the same. The protests of that spring became known as the Social Revolution. It was a turning point in the nation's history, and institutions from workplaces to universities would undergo a liberalization due to the protests. One of the most lasting images from the strike was a series of posters, simple designs emblazoned with the slogans and demands of those involved. One such poster called people to strike, declaring, "Working now is working with a gun to your head." Another read simply, "Factories, Universities, Union." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to tell you, I get a kick out of the story of Susan Collins. Some protesters went to her house and they wrote in chalk, in very colorful chalk, according to the Bangor police. Very well written, very nice, colorful. Susie, please, support Mainers, support women's rights, and please support the Women's Protection Act. And she called the police, and the police said there's nothing threatening here. They didn't arrest anyone. But they did call out the Department of Public Works to wash her sidewalk off. I mean, that's the most appalling part of this, that they actually used public resources to clean her sidewalk. She should have been out there with her own hose, or here's the better idea. Just wait for it to rain. Just my thought. Anyway, welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. By the way, need some WBAI buddies for folks who become buddies. We're going to send you a copy of our book, Daddy, What's the Middle Class? Our history tour back in 2013. We did a labor history tour, and this is just a little story about what we did. Let's go to the phone lines. We got Rebecca on line 1. Rebecca, how are we doing today?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you. I hope you are as well.
Doing great. What's on your mind?
The school board election. So when you were speaking, I'm reminded, Justin, I'm going to make a plug for everybody that school board elections are the most basic local way we can get involved in having a change in who our and who runs our communities, basically, because school boards have a huge influence on local level policy.
Yep.
And that's where it starts. And if we do not have an engaged citizenry, get out and vote. And it's always outside of New York City. It's always this coming Tuesday, May 17th. So I'm going to make a plug for everybody, and you don't have to be a parent to vote. And I think that's a huge misunderstanding, and it involves your taxes, and it involves policy that impacts your community. So I thank you for taking my call.
No, appreciate it, Rebecca. Thanks so much. No, Rebecca's right. These are really the local stuff, and this is what drives me crazy. It's the local stuff that's most important, that affects your life more than anything. Everyone gets all jazzed up for the presidential election. Generally, who's in the White House doesn't have an awful lot of effect on your life. It's who's your local, county commissioner, who's your mayor, who's your town supervisor, who's on your school board, who's on your city council. Those people make laws and regulation and things that affect your daily life. And yet in the off-year elections, I shouldn't say off-year, in the midterm elections and the local elections, there's always a huge drop-off. And those are the ones that we should be organizing around the most. And here's where the most opportunities are. And this is what the right wing understands and what they've been organizing around, which is why when you looked at what happened in Virginia, they really got out. They got their single issue. They got people all tizzy, all wadded up in the panties. They were lying to them, but they gave them red meat. They got them all. They shoved the outrage candy down their throat to get them into those spaces so that they could take over those bodies and then push their agenda. They understand it. And it comes back to, as my grandfather said, when a rich guy takes a buck out of his pocket to tell you don't need something, you better spend two to get it. So when I see the wealth class spending money on these kind of programs, drilling down to the local, pay attention. You think of the American Legislative Exchange Council. Their job was, to write all kind of legislation for legislators across this country. They drilled down to the state level. They literally did the homework of state representatives and state senators. In fact, there are multiple cases across this country where they handed out model legislation that those legislators didn't even bother taking the name of the organization off of. They didn't even bother putting their name on, just handed in someone else's homework. And that group also has a county level group where they've drilled down even further into our government to take over at the local level. Because they understand if you can get someone elected as, dog catcher, you can influence that policy. And then you put your zealots into those places. And this is where the religious right, you can be as angry at them as you want. This is where they've done the organizing. And, it takes me back to that Ralph Reed. He was one of the back in the 90s, one of the faces of the moral majority group, they used to call them. But I remember seeing an interview with him, and someone said, how did you build this amazing thing? Because I think it was around Alito being put on the Supreme Court. And if you remember when Alito was being confirmed, the churches were all linking up. Now, this was before, the internet really took off and you could have huge Zoom meetings and stuff like that. There was some technological skill that would go into linking up, a whole bunch of different places. You needed to have some technical ability back then. And they were having these Justice Sundays where they were linking up. I think if I remember right, they linked up 10,000 churches across the country so that they could get into the churches and have these, right after the sermon, they would have these pitches on, why the good, faithful people needed to push for Alito. And you think back to that moment and put it now. This was all of that planning and all the organizing that those people did back then that sadly everybody ignored. Oh, they're just crazy. They were building, they were organizing, they were pushing, they were investing, they were voting. And most of them were workers voting against their economic interest. And again, the Thomas Franks, what's the matter with Kansas? Because everyone's like, they're voting against their own interests. No, they were voting against their economic interests because sadly their unions had been broken up. Sadly, the trade policies were against them. They felt helpless economically. They felt that there was nobody listening, nobody helping. So what did they do? They went where they thought they had power. And where they thought they had power was in the culture, was in their faith, in their religion. And they went extreme to that way. And this is where we are. So when they were talking to them, Justice Sunday, Justice, Justice Sunday, Sunday, we weren't paying attention. And they got Alito on the court. And Alito has written this memo that is now put the stake in the ground that may put the stake in the heart of Roe. We don't know yet. I don't know what the final product's going to be. I can't imagine they're going to walk it back much further, maybe soften a little, but I can't imagine it's going all the way back. But the lesson in this, and for me there is a lesson here, because the pendulum does swing. Just because something happens doesn't mean it's done. That's the great thing about this country. We can organize and we can make change. It's a great thing about our Constitution. It is a living, breathing document. Even though our zealot friends on the extreme, they would tell us, no, that's the original document. It's a dead document. It's only what's verbatim in the words that, well, they interpreted differently, 200 plus years ago. The idea that we can make change, that we can organize, that we can undo horrible, that we can right wrongs, that we have the opportunity to stand shoulder to shoulder. And look, we and this is where, I got some heat over during the week, during our weekly show. I said, look, sometimes in order to move our country forward, we may have to stand hand to hand, shoulder to shoulder, in solidarity with someone we don't necessarily like, with someone we necessarily don't agree with all the time. We may have to stand with people that we don't know. And that's okay. It's a good thing. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Love to hear your thoughts. If you want to jump in, if you got a comment, love to hear it. But this is where we are in this moment. The organizing has to happen, and it can happen. And this is why all of the union organizing that I'm seeing gives me hope. Seeing young people saying, you know what, coming out of this pandemic, not going to take it. Not going to take the crap wages, not going to take the harassing conditions, not going to take it. It's the kind of power that I think is important. And as we're building power, a working class power, we can push back against the kind of extremism that we see coming from the far right, the kind of hatred, the kind of zealotry that we see coming from the far right. And look, we don't always have to agree, and preaching some form of tolerance, I think, is important as well. Just my thought. Let's go to Greg in New Jersey. Greg, how are we doing?
Hello, sir. A great program as usual. Three things. I'll be as quick as I can.
No.
First of all, Samuel Alito, that incredible jurist, that incredible prosecutor from the great state of New Jersey, the longest federal trial in history of the United States took place in the 80s in Newark. 23 members of the Lucchese family between New Jersey, Philadelphia, and New York were under indictment. And guess what? After a year and a half, all 23 of them walked because they had a superb legal team of North Jersey lawyers. And Samuel Alito, the prosecutor, was so freaking incompetent. How he made any type of position in law is really astounding. But just take a look at that, folks. It's amazing what happened. This guy's a Supreme Court justice is a joke. The long history of our country, Rick, as you talk about labor history, 2 years ago, we had treason in our country. We had people take down the American flag in the Capitol and put up the flag of Donald Trump. That's treason. That's sedition. That's a whole bunch of things. This is what the conservatives do. Another conservative situation took place in 1860. When a good man was going to become president of the United States, he was leaning against the horrible institution of slavery. And what did the conservatives do? They broke away from the country. They committed treason. It's the same spirit of them now. And going back to the Founding Fathers that they always quote, the liberals were the Founding Fathers. the Conservatives were the Tories who wanted to stay with England. How is it they don't own up to this, Rick? I mean,
because they love the poorly educated, and none of the things you said matter because it's not in the right book, Greg. It's not in the right book.
Well, something I need to allude to, a man who worked for the Musicians Union in New York City for almost 45 years. His name was Patrick Variali. He was a bass player back in the 60s. He went to work for the union. He became head of recording for the whole all of North America. This man, for recordings of major artists, jazz, theater, whatever, TV commercials, PBS, he was the guy who made all of the stuff work. Advocate for the working musician. He, yesterday, a couple of months before his retirement, he was hit by an MTA bus on the way to work in Staten Island.
Oh, that's horrible.
Look him up, folks. He's a gentle man, incredibly knowledgeable. I worked in conjunction with him from the Musicians Union in New York for a number of years. It was a privilege. He was one of the guys when the whole room would be going crazy, and he would calm everybody down and what can we do? Let's make this work. And he would stand up to the bad guys and make them pay the musicians. It's not an exaggeration to say that, Mr. Variali, you could fill Yankee Stadium with the musicians, and in fact, all the other stadiums in the area with the musicians who benefited by that man's work over so many years. He literally was on his way to work early in the morning, like 5 a.m., like he typically did from Staten Island, and he got hit by an MTA bus. So we are all collectively crying right now. He was one of our great people. So he's in heaven for sure. But this whole other wave, Rick, that you talk about every week, please continue doing it. We need this because, I mean, here we are. What's when they're saying, oh, this is the first, as you said about 20 minutes ago, Roe v. Wade's the first thing. They've been doing this for 40 years with the air traffic controllers, right?
Yeah. No, the shot heard across the boardroom.
Yeah, so please continue what you're doing, and sometimes we're going to stand on a line with people we don't agree with on everything, but we agree on most things, and it's for the benefit of everybody. So, anyway, Mr. Variali, you're in heaven. Thank you for all your work, and Rick, continue what you're doing.
Yeah, it's horrible news, Greg. I appreciate you bringing that to us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good stuff, Greg. No, that's terrible news. I hate hearing stuff like that, especially someone so close to retirement and. It's terrible. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You're just joining us. Make sure you grab the podcast. Never miss a moment of the program. Also, our Monday through Friday shows are at the sites, wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes to iHeart, Podbean, Stitcher, everywhere in between. Always there, always available. Make sure you subscribe and never miss a moment. Also, leave us a comment, 5-star rating, all of that stuff. We appreciate it. Going to take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1975. That was the day workers at Tolteca Foods in Richmond, California, went out on strike. Many were undocumented Mexican women who helped organize the plant in 1969. In his book, The Revolutionary Imaginations of Greater Mexico, historian Alan Aledo Gomez states that the women had grown increasingly frustrated with the lack of union response regarding speed-ups, immigration raids, discretionary firings, substandard wages and unsafe working conditions, and began to look elsewhere for support. They reached out to the organization CASA, which provided legal and social services for undocumented immigrants. The women decided to strike without authorization from the Contra Costa Labor Council. They packed the council's emergency meeting, where they put their scarred bodies on display to attest to the dangerous and abusive working conditions and poor wages. Just as the council sanctioned the strike, workers learned the company started removing machinery from the factory. They packed the picket lines to stop the trucks from taking out the equipment. The first driver stopped. The second plowed through several women. The strike committee won an injunction to prevent the removal of equipment, and after 3 weeks, workers won their demands. Gomez argues the strike was important for several reasons. It demonstrated that a large female and undocumented workforce could organize and win a strike against a transnational company at a moment when unions were increasingly under attack. They built a rank-and-file independence that built support for their demands from their union leaders and the broader community. The women workers at Tolteca fought for bread and butter issues. They also worked to reshape their union to take on broader issues of social justice that included immigration rights and women's rights.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
One 416 Rick. 1-866-416-7425. You got a thought, question, comment? I want to hear it. Also, make sure you check out our website, thericksmithshow.com, where you can grab the podcast, never miss an episode, never miss a moment. Subscribe, share. Also, become a WBAI buddy. We need your help to maintain staying on the air and helping WBAI remain a strong member of the community. Community radio depends on you, so helping hand is always helpful. And is our part to help you do that? We're going to give you a copy of our book, Daddy, What's the Middle Class, when you become a sponsor of the station to help keep us. Just say, hey, we like the Rick Smith Show, and we will send you a copy of that. And if you make a sizable donation, I won't sign it. How about that? We'll make that pledge to you. So here's some interesting news. This is one of those moments where you go, I've been watching the Marjorie 3 name and the Republicans whine and complain and do their grievance on the baby formula issue. We have a problem in this country that there's not enough baby formula right now. Now, there are a couple of reasons for it. One, obviously, we're almost at monopoly status. There are only 4 companies that that control like 90% of the manufacturing of baby formula in this country. You got Abbott, you got Rickett, you got Nestle, and Perrigo, I guess it's pronounced. And I think 2 of those are owned by foreign companies. One of them had a bacteria problem that evidently killed 2 babies, so they shut down their lines. That has been part of the cause of the shortage. There's part of me goes, this is an attack on the regulation and on that process. The other part of me goes, this is corporate America being opportunistic, going, hey, there's a good chance that we can go and we can gouge the you-know-what out of consumers. Understanding that this is where my frustration is. Corporate America knows that the federal government spends a lot of money on formula. And we do it in a lot of ways because, unfortunately, a lot of our social programs are aimed at children because a lot of our children are in poverty. Because, sadly, we have a lot of low-income families. On a certain level, good on us, because we have some policies that say, well, we don't want kids starving in the middle of the street. If they go hungry at night, well, there are those who think that's okay. I don't. But a lot of government money goes into formula. A lot of government money goes to these programs, and there's part of me, and I guess it's the cynical part. It's the part of me who's been watching this inflation situation that is just devastating the working poor and the working class of this country, going, this is corporate America seeing an opportunity to gouge our eyes out, not ramping up production, certainly not having a system that has a reserve, but taking advantage of a moment where, hey, well, sorry, we're going to have to jack up prices because supply and demand. Now, fortunately, the House Oversight and Reform Committee is launching an investigation. They claim they're going to find out, why we have this shortage. of which has been reported in some areas as high as 43%, a 43% shortage of formula. And you go, how's that possible? Biden this week announced measures that was going to help, do something to boost food production. That's a good thing on a separate level. But I'm looking at this and I'm going, on a certain level, we need somebody who's calling these companies out. And I think the investigation's good. My fear is we're going to throw money at these 4 companies instead of threatening to break them up and cause more competition. I think there should be 10. I think there should be more companies that do this. Now, my friends on the left, and this is where I love how easily we're distracted. My friends on the left are attacking Trump for his trade policies. Going after, we're putting tariffs on baby formula from other countries. And I'm going, I'm a firm believer of domestic production for domestic consumption. We should be producing the things that we need, the things that we should be producing domestically. Baby formulas, one of those things we could produce domestically, I think. Anyone disagree? I don't think so. I don't think it's unique. I don't think there's anything particularly special about baby formula that we would need to specialize in another country. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something that there's a particular chemical or maybe there's a spice in there that I didn't know. But I don't particularly think that this is something that needs to be produced in a central country. I know I don't want it coming from China. We've seen the stories in the past of the baby formula with melamine in it, which is dangerous. Don't want that. I want domestic production for domestic consumption. It makes no sense to me that there are only 4 companies. I like the fact that we should return to a day of regional manufacturing so that if one area has a problem, you could ramp up production in other areas and fill that need. Sadly, what we've done is we've allowed corporate America to grow so large and to consolidate that our supply chain is so dependent on everything being perfect. Just-in-time inventory, on-demand supply systems, all of this stuff, that when one thing goes wrong, chaos. And when that chaos happens, corporate America has learned behavior that, we're going to bail them out. They know that when bad things happen to them, we're going to bail them out. It's that socialism for the very wealthy, extreme capitalism for everyone else. Like supply and demand works for consumers. We don't have enough baby formula, the price goes up. But corporate America, we're going to give you more resource so that you can do more. We'll take the risk out of business. This is my frustration of where we are. And it's been learned behavior time and time and time again. And this is the frustration that I have. And this is where, again, building worker power. You and I saying enough of this already. Every time the banks get themselves in trouble, what do? We race to their aid. You go back to the savings and loan scandals of the 80s. This is learned behavior. They know that they can be wildly reckless. They know that they can do things that, we'll bail them out. And I see this as kind of the same thing. And that's why it's so frustrating. There's no one holding them accountable. And I'll give you an example. The meatpacking industry during the Trump years, it's now being reported. We're hyping this shortage. You may remember there's a meat and pork shortage. There's shortages everywhere. And yet you didn't see it. But they used it as a reason to, one, fight back on any regulation of their workforce. They used it as an opportunity to jack up prices through the freaking roof, which are still jacked up. And we now know that those claims of shortages are BS. There weren't any shortages. They just used these as an opportunity to jack up the prices, which, again, are still through the roof. They got us used to paying exorbitant prices. Because, the pandemic. The pandemic. They get to use the pandemic, and their profits are skyrocketing. The CEO pay still through the roof. Never mind the 269 plus workers that were killed. Never mind all the people who were harmed because we didn't regulate them enough. Now, in those workplaces where they had unions, and this is again where I come back to my belief in organized labor and my belief in workers being empowered in the workplace. In those food processing plants where I spoke with representatives who proactively went at the very beginning and said, hey, we've got to deep clean these facilities. We've got to redesign workspaces. We've got to bring in additional facilities, trailers for lunchrooms. We've got to stagger shifts so people aren't running into each other. We've got to do smart things to protect workers, to keep businesses open, to keep things moving and production going so companies can profit. But yes, so we protect our members and the employees. And it worked. It worked. But it did cost a little. It did cost a little, but profits weren't as high. Corporate America doesn't like that. They want as much as they when they pick up a quarter, they want that eagle screaming. And this is where, I come back to, Democrats. You need to be the party of the working class again. And it was a Paul Begala clip that I loved. He said, how did the Democrats go from the party of the worker on the factory floor to the party of the person in the factory lounge? And it's right. And I would argue he was part of that, but he's right. How did that happen? It's because we let them. And this is where and same thing with the Republicans. How did the Republicans go from having pro-labor Republicans to being the party that at every turn is attacking workers? Now, speaking of attacking workers, this week it was announced every year on Capitol Hill they do a worst boss. Evidently, Indy Politics has released their worst boss on Capitol Hill, and it is Representative Victoria Spartz, a Republican representative from Indiana. I had never heard of Victoria Spartz. Actually had to look her up. But according to this report, she is the worst boss on Capitol Hill, and she did not fail. When asked about it, she told Indy Politics that a lot of these young people just need to toughen up. That is exactly the response that you would expect from the worst boss on Capitol Hill. Which leads me into Elon Musk, who did an interview recently with the Financial Times. Now, Elon Musk is now the golden child, the darling of the political right, because he's going to, maybe he's going to buy Twitter. I'm not sure at this point. It's kind of on hold, I guess. He was going to buy it, kind of on hold. Not sure why, not sure what's going on. Maybe it was just a PR stunt, not 100% sure. But the SpaceX Tesla CEO, interviewed by Financial Times, criticized Americans, you, me, working people, because he believes we're just trying to get out of work. We're lazy, basically what he's saying. But he said he loved the Chinese though, a lot of super talented Chinese. He said hardworking people they are. Those Chinese, they believe in manufacturing, strongly believe in manufacturing. He said. His quote was, they won't just burn the midnight oil, they'll be burning the 3 a.m. oil. They won't even leave the factory type thing. Whereas in America, people are trying to avoid going to work at all. Now, you may remember, we've talked about this over the years. A lot of people in China are trying to get away from the 996 culture that's going on there. For those who don't know what the 996 culture is, it is 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. 996, 9 a.m., 9 p.m., 6 days a week. Used to be the American work culture. You may remember, as I had said at the beginning of the hour, the good old days of the 80s and 90s, the 1880s and 90s, where our current robber barons want to take us back to, people like Elon here, our modern day robber baron, want to take us back to those days, where the people believed that education was, wasted on the working class, made them uppity, made them not want to work, made them want to go home and have lives, made them want better for their children, didn't want their kids working in the mines. In China, they're fighting back against the sun up, the sun down kind of mentality that we lived through in this country 100 years ago. But it's not the culture, it's the mandate in China. And this is where I come back to, I love the fact that, the right has chosen Elon as their poster child, their love child, their God, if you will, because they think that Elon upsets the libtards. It brings out the liberal tears for their Chinese-made mug. When the reality is that the world that someone like Musk envisions is a world that that our grandparents and great-grandparents fought to protect us from. That desperate world. And this is where, all of these attacks on the 20th century, all of these moves backward, part of the plan. Part of making us desperate and pliable. When Donald Trump said, I love the poorly educated, he loves the poorly educated because the poorly educated, they don't understand where someone like Musk envisions the future. Why would a 996 plan be good for someone like Musk? You think about his plant, in California, the Tesla plant he's got there. Well, hey, if we can get people working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week, that means we got, more work being done, more product being pumped out. And if we can do it without overtime, so much better. We can tear down those laws. We can get rid of minimum wage laws. We can get rid of maximum hour laws. We can get rid of safe working conditions, because understand, for the industry that they're in, the Tesla plant is a more dangerous workplace. Yeah, that's the world. But we don't think about that. He's just going to put Donald Trump back on Twitter, and that's why we love him. It's crazy. Crazy stuff. Question is, are you going to put up with it? Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Got lots more to get to. Also hear your thoughts. If you're at the big rally shutting down the Brooklyn Bridge, if you're at Foley Square, love to hear it. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1998. And if you tried to catch a cab in New York City on that particular day, you probably did not have much luck. The city's yellow cab drivers held a one-day strike to protest Mayor Rudolph Giuliani's new taxi cab regulations. 90% of the city's more than 12,000 taxi cabs stayed parked on that day. 2,000 cabs lined up along 14th Street and Avenue D in a demonstration of strength and a sign of solidarity. It was the first taxi driver strike in New York City in 30 years. The strike was led by the National Taxi Workers Alliance and their founder, Haravi Desai. After 15 years of trying to organize, the taxi drivers had just founded their union that February. The union represented workers from 85 countries, as many of the cab drivers were immigrants. The New York Times reported that city officials were stunned by the success of the strike. The one-day action showed the solidarity of the taxi drivers union. Today, the Taxi Workers Alliance represents 200,000 taxi drivers who provide an estimated 1 billion rides each year to New Yorkers and tourists. One New York taxi driver expressed the union's importance, saying, "With my union, I get the spiritual boost and the inspiration to overcome the obstacles in my track. I am a member of the AFL-CIO. It's a great feeling." Unionization is important for taxi drivers. They often have to pay steep fees for their medallion to operate their cabs, and fluctuating fuel costs can eat into their profits. Rideshare programs such as Uber are further eroding cab drivers' livelihoods. Organizing workers like cab drivers, car wash workers, and service employees is an important front for today's labor movement.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us at Labor History in 2.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
This one made me laugh. House Republicans want to mandate on visa applications that you declare that you're not a communist. Does this seem like something harkening back to the past? I mean, what? What are you talking about? Yeah, we're, but again, it's that division. It's that, it's crazy. But hey, thanks, Jim Banks, Republican from Indiana. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Let's go to the phones. Got Diane from the Bronx. Diane, what's on your mind?
Oh, a lot of things, but I wanted to say how much I've been listening to your show.
Well, thank you.
I'm usually not listening. Yes, and I want to applaud the fact that you take callers. I'm finding out on WBAI, my home station, that more and more of those shows do not have call-ins, or out of an hour show, they caught at the last 2 minutes. Taking a call or two. That's not what it's about. We're supposed to have, it's supposed to be the voice of the voiceless. So Sister Myatt, I heard her saying the same thing. Okay, so I'm saying amen to that. Let's get more. And also let everybody know they should be listening to your show.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Nope, that's it. You get something else on your mind? All right. Well, I appreciate that. No, the whole point of this program is, we don't usually bring guests in. I want to hear from people. I want to hear what folks have to say, and have conversations around the top stories of the week. Our weekly show, we try and get people to call in, but more guest driven, more prepared. Today, when we do our show here, it's freewheeling, so the phones are open. You got something? We want to hear about it. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425 is that call-in number. The phones are open. But I look at this, and this Jim Banks thing. All non-immigrants are going to have to declare that they're not communists. And you go, I'm confused at where this is coming from. And I think, again, this is part of the divisiveness of what's coming out of the Republican Party. Now, look, maybe is this pointed at China? Maybe. I'm not really 100% sure, but it's interesting. It's interesting. It's also interesting that someone named McCarthy is back in the news, because Kevin McCarthy, along with Representatives Scott Perry, Jim Jordan, Andy Biggs, and Mo Brooks, they have been subpoenaed by the January 6th Commission to testify as to their behavior on January 6th, which they're not going to testify. They're not going to say a word. Trust me, nothing is coming from them. But I think they should be. And this is one of those moments where you go, should our representatives have the ability to get around answering questions about what they've done in our name? Should our representatives, should they be able to evade answering questions about their actions in our name? And I say no. I think if it were you or me, if it were any of us, they'd be dragging us into that seat, putting us in that seat and making us at least plead the fifth. And I'm okay with that. If Scott Perry, my personal congressman, wants to sit in that chair and plead the fifth to every single question, that is his constitutional right. But I don't think he should be able to hide behind not going and answering the question. I don't think so. And I know people are saying, well, it's got to go through a court process. Do you think you'd get that? Do you think the average everyday working person would get that? The answer is, I don't think so. Or I guess you could if you had the right amount of money. And this is, again, it's that difference between the elite and the rest of us. And that's the frustrating part of this moment that we're in. Anyway, I'm going to have to take a quick break here for the top of the hour. Want to hear your thoughts, questions, comments? Give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Also, become a WBAI buddy. Right now is the time to help the station stay strong, stay on the air. This is what community radio does. Need your help to survive and thrive. Make a donation by going to WBAI.org. And if you say, hey, the Rick Smith Show is the show that I like, we will send you a copy of Daddy, What's the Middle Class, our labor history tour book from 2013. It is a fabulous read. Fun, entertaining, informative, all of that stuff. And also, remember, if you missed any of the program, download the podcast. Always there, always available. Subscribe, share, comment, all of it. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show on WBAI 99.5 New York.
Nearly every nation with an advanced economy, and some not so advanced, treats child care as a fundamental public good, essential to nurturing children, families, and the whole society. But not our U.S. of A. Indeed, our so-called leaders relegate millions of working parents and 21 million kids under 5 to the tender mercies of a for-profit market, with child care facilities ranging from impossibly expensive to helter-skelter unlicensed kiddie corrals. Embarrassingly, while right-wingers mindlessly salute the U.S. as exceptional, they fail to note that what's exceptional about our child care system is that it's such a shambles it can't even be called a system, much less caring. For the past decade, independent journalist and economic analyst Bryce Covert has documented the worsening social crisis caused by this abject failure of leadership. 2/3 of our pre-K kids have both parents in the workforce, meaning care outside the home is essential. 85% of the parents say that finding quality, affordable child care in their area is a problem somewhere between serious and impossible. Nationwide, the annual cost for a 4-year-old's daycare averages about $13,000. Despite millions of working families finding this essential service unaffordable or even unavailable, political leaders have ignored their plight. Child care aid reaches only 15% of qualified kids. Some callous governors even divert chunks of federal child care subsidies to their own political priorities, such as corporate welfare. In 2017, even before COVID-19 abruptly shut down thousands of care centers, 40% of America's children lived in child care deserts, zip codes with zero programs or so few that 2/3 or more of the area's children are unable to get in. This is Jim Hightower saying, is this the best we can do for the future of our nation? The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Lots on the phone lines. Let's go to Stephen in Harlem. Stephen, what's going on?
Yes, thank you for taking my call. Just wanted to, feedback on, you brought up a lot of excellent points as far as I'm concerned. I know the manufacturers, the oil companies in this country, they could have ramped up production a long time ago. They refused to.
Yep.
I read that they wouldn't mind prices of $150 to $200 a barrel. It's like you said, it's just this robber baron mentality. Oh, was it Friedman, the name of the way back in the 70s? He said that their only responsibility is to the almighty dollar. And we can see the results. The company is getting in more and more tough straits. And unfortunately, what I see is when more than likely when the whole administration change over and the other team gets back in power, we're going to look back on this, for instance, in New York City as the good time. 2022 is going to be thought of as a high watermark. Because I don't know if you remember way back in the 70s, Ford to New York, dropped dead. It's been going on for generations. It went on during the previous administration. It was relaxed because they put all that money out, which, now we have the inflationary problems. But it was a rock and a hard place. What were you going to do? They told everybody they had to stay home, and So they had to, maybe they overdid it. I'm not sure on that, but it's a possibility. And as far as what you were just talking about, the rule of law has been thumbed the nose at by all of these people, starting at the top. As soon as you're able to say F you to a subpoena written out by a judge, that's the rule of law. And as long as you're able to go, no, and an excellent point. Any one of us would have been in real trouble. So the country's in real trouble. It's unfortunate, but
this is, Stephen, this is where we take this back. This is where I think we have to come together, because we've allowed ourselves to be divided. The wealth class, the quote always attributed to Jay Gould, I could pay half the working class to murder the other half. This is that moment where we don't allow ourselves to be that kind of divided, to where we then come back into the middle of the street. We may not always agree, we may not always like each other, but push forward on the issues that are important, the kitchen table stuff, how we support our families, how we educate our kids, how we make better lives. I think that's where we have to start.
I mean, nobody can afford to take the time off to be in the streets. Like you pointed out, you got both parents working so many times. The rents are going through the roof. They're raising the rent stabilization rents. I heard one lady on the public radio saying she can't afford the rent now at $1,700. Now, whatever the increase is, it's going to put her in the street. All these moratoriums on evictions are ending. It's like I just see bad stuff on the horizon. I'm all for it. Yeah. I've been an activist since McGovern. Remember McGovern?
Yeah.
Well, I was one of the 50 best campaign workers in New York City in that year. And I think New York City was the only place we won. Nixon trounced them. I was anti-war and smelled a rat on that one way before they came out and admitted that it was all a hoax, this Gulf-Tompkin and all that. I just smelled a rat. And there are a lot of rats, and we're just moving towards this, imperialism, fascism, really. What's fascism? When the government and business are the same, like you own the hotel and you're the president and you have all the people going to the hotel. I mean, that's just one small example. And then, nothing can be done. You have these laws that mean nothing because they're not enforced,
Yep. Well, this is again.
So you have a person that has all their life, has been like, I'm a liar and a thief. What do you think of me? You like me? So,
excellent point, Stephen.
I just see we're in trouble. I'm all with you. Yeah, let's get out there on the street. But I see so much division. So much. It's the old story: divide and conquer. Yeah.
Well, let's come together. For me, that's the message here, Stephen. I appreciate it, man.
I think it's a great idea.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks for the call. Please call back again real soon. Good stuff, Stephen. Thanks so much. Let's check out what George has got on line 3. George, what's going on, man?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. What's on your mind, brother?
Well, I just I'm right now currently doing some door dashing, but I'm also a Navy veteran of 19 years of 9 months, and I was born and raised in New York City with a phenomenal background. So I was here in your station, and I am definitely a hard worker. I've been working all my life. Family, I was blessed with a wonderful, great grandparents. They're always there working and to survive in the New York City. So I actually decided to listen up, and I heard all the conversation. And yes, we are facing some major challenges, and we're going to continue facing the major challenges if we keep allowing the corruption. And I say this, that by hearing all the conversations that you've been bringing up, yes, unity and the person that wants to work, it is time for really a good unity. I'm just really proud to hear this station. I really don't hear any radios. I'm constantly working. I'm also a grad student. I will say I'm a Ford Scholar graduate in the Bronx, okay? So I just want to say something. It is time for us to make sure that we have a better relationship with the working class. We have to keep on pushing forward. And yes, domestic labor, domestic products needs to come back.
Yep.
We have all this wonderful resource, but we're letting it slip. And I seen it slip away when I was active duty in 2008 to 2009 when there was some kind of housing bubble, and I don't know what kind of agreement came about, but when the GDP from the maritime industry and transportation has dropped from our side and China took over, big hint right there. And then I just see there's a snowball effect. And, I just want to say thank you for hearing the show or having me on the show. I'm really going to sign up with it more. You can find me at, my own little Facebook, but I try to, after being such a Republican, conservative, hard work, I really try to push that. And especially being a New Yorker, especially from the city, and I face every challenge because of my background. I got some South American, Ecuadorian background from my grandmother, and she's an O'Brien, and my grandfather's Irish American, and my father from Spain. So these are the things that I was raised in these areas, in the low poverty low income area. But we still try to push along. But every time we push forward, somebody either has an intent to steal or a jealousy. That's that mentality that is wrong. We need to keep on working together, pushing forward, and growing.
There you go.
And I like your show.
Thanks so much, George. I appreciate it, man. Good talking to you. Please call again. No, this is one of these are the stories that have to be told. People working hard. That idea that I grew up believing in. You work hard, you play by the rules. That's how you get ahead. I mean, for me, that's the way forward in all of this. I appreciate the call, George. Let's go to I got Gina on line 2. Gina, thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
Hey, how are you?
I am great. What's going on?
It's very interesting. Well, we talk often about women's lib and women should have the right to have abortion. I think we women need that. We need to have the ability to terminate a pregnancy. Not that you want to kill, but what I always find kind of contradictory about the people on the right is that they don't mind saying that you can't terminate a pregnancy, but they sure want to tell you that it's all right for your grown sons and daughters to go and kill somebody or be killed themselves. What's the difference between saying, no, you can't kill someone or supposedly end a pregnancy in the womb, but you can go ahead and kill somebody after they're born?
I see it even simpler than that. I see it as a woman's right to self-determination. This idea that you should have the right, it's between you, your doctor, your family, your conscience, your God. It should have nothing to do with me, and it certainly should have nothing to do with a bunch of old white guys on a Supreme Court. It should have nothing to do with legislatures. This is between you and your maker. At the end of the day, for me, simply, as the father of 2 daughters, I want them to determine when they have children, how many children they have, or if they have children. That is their body, that is their future, that is their right, and no one, not me, not anyone, should have the right to tell them what they can do with their body. And this is where I come from right from the start. Am I for or against abortion? I personally am against it. So I will never have one as a 55-year-old white guy. That said, I shouldn't be able to tell you what you can do with your body, Gina. I think I lost Gina. Oops, I guess I lost Gina. Sorry, Gina. I apologize if we lost you. No, I think Gina's on. Is that you, Gina?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you put her on hold. Sorry, Gina. So does that make sense to you?
Yes. Can I just ask a question?
Please.
Now, what do you say to people who say that their tax dollars is going to pay for abortion, so they don't like it?
They don't. There are no tax dollars going to abortions.
Oh, don't we pay for the clinics?
Nope. The money that goes to Planned Parenthood does not go to abortion. The money that goes to Planned Parenthood goes for contraception, for women's care. Only 3% of what Planned Parenthood does, as I'm told, is abortive care, and that is segregated aside. The rest of the money that goes to Planned Parenthood is for services for women to get gynecological care for low-income women and for contraception. And even then, I think that is 100% of where we should be spending money. But we're not spending. There's no money going towards abortive care. That isn't happening. If someone's telling you that, they're lying to you.
Good. You clarified it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. I appreciate it. Good stuff. Let's go to Joey on line 4. Joey, I appreciate the call. What's on your mind, brother?
Hey, good evening, Rick. I'd like to start by congratulating my new brothers and sisters with the private security consulting company who work the security post over at the Old Town Fun Spot at Kissimmee, Florida. It's a great place to bring the kids and family. They've just gone union. They voted to come under the banner of the SPFPA. So I'm telling everybody, if you listen to Central Florida and you get a union card, head on over to Old Town. Enjoy yourself down there. Go on out there and support them. Bring your family. They just gone union, so let's support our new brothers and sisters out there.
Outstanding. Good shout out to them. Next time we're in Florida, we're going to stop.
Thanks again. That's great. Yeah, it's a great place to bring the family. They got Ferris wheels, cruising. They got plenty of classic cars. They got a great haunted mansion. They got haunted houses. They got great activities for the kids, family oriented. Yeah, they got dancing for the adults, live music. So great place to be. And now it's under a union banner, so it's you can be proud you're supporting the union when you're down there as well.
Excellent stuff. There's great stories I love to hear. What else is on your mind there, brother?
I'd just like to thank you for being such a strong voice for the working class, for doing what you do, and keeping up your show. Stay strong, brother. Solidarity.
Solidarity, brother. Thank you, Joey. I appreciate it. Good stuff. Let's go to Rose on line 1. As always, love having Rose on the program. Rose, what's going on?
Well, I got 2 points. Number one is, isn't it interesting that people will be paid to turn in their neighbors because they suspect they're pregnant, but the guy who actually doesn't, he doesn't have to, come up with child support or possibly be castrated for his dirty deeds, banging every woman in sight. And then the other thing is, and this is quite different than what that issue is all about, I really believe that this is all setting us up for food shortages. I'm a former professional chef, and what blows me away in this country is that everything is packaged for a family of 6. I buy broccoli. I can't get a small amount of broccoli. I have to take the whole head of cauliflower. I got to have a bag of organic carrots in the refrigerator growing roots before I'm done with them. I really smell a much bigger rat hanging around in the basement, and that's the next thing they're coming. I mean, the infant formula, that's a real hard bleeder, isn't it? We just are being so manipulated. I actually called the DNC yesterday and said, how come I can't get a half a head of this and a half a head of that packaged appropriately so that I'm going to eat it 3 times in a row as opposed to try to eat it in 5 and watching it turn to compost in my refrigerator. And speaking of compost, there's a lady by the name of Winona LaDuke. She ran as vice president with Ralph Nader. And there is capacity to make plastic kind of bags out of hemp products, which when you're tired of them or they're kind of outlived their purposes, you can put them in the garden and they become compost. Why isn't it our government going after this kind of thinking? I mean, I just feel so bad about all these poor people in Europe now. There's no discussion. We're going to send them arms. We're not sending them any warm clothing. We're not sending them anything of any value except more war toys.
Yeah, I'm going to side with the war toys right now because it's what they need to fight off the Russians. But I do agree with you.
I quite concur, but we also have to have a conversation about how can we help them put their lives back together in such like a Marshall Plan. We've got to take into the fact that, hey, we put all those military bases in Romania, Bulgaria, Poland, and Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and now you're dealing with a mad dog there with a hell of an ego that when George Bush saw him, I looked into his eyes and I loved the man. Remember that?
Yeah, so into his soul.
Yeah, his soul, all right.
That was the comment. As they squeezed into that little Volkswagen.
Yeah, well, American people will get the government they deserve when they just keep pestering and calling and hollering and complaining. If you're going to be Mr. Nice Guy and stay home and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," they're in control. No, they're not.
We're in control.
We have got to get to be a little crankier in this country. We are an aging population. And as I say, I bring up the food thing because why do I have to throw away food, which is, to me, the ultimate sin? Because American produce people want it, it's made for a family of 6. I'm not 6 people. There are damn few families today that are 6 people. We don't demand of our government to say, hey, wait a minute. We got all these singles and couples. They're aging out. I mean, we are the majority. Why aren't we looking at a way of packing this stuff so it's usable to people? The rest of it, freeze it, Some people like frozen broccoli. I personally won't use it.
Yeah, I would say they would probably argue back at you that it's just a corporate decision. We've privatized.
I know all about corporate decisions. They're mad.
We don't want to regulate that because we're on a regulation kick in this country because regulations are bad. Don't you understand that, Rose? Job killers, we're told.
Listen,
Job
I've been living my whole damn life, and I was born in 48. Okay. All right. Well, listen, you're so fabulous. We love you. I listen to you religiously every week. And you just keep doing what you're doing because this country needs a good kick in the butt.
There you go. You're good for my ego, Rose. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks so much. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You got a thought, question, comment? I want to hear it. Also, make sure you check out the podcast if you miss any portion of our program, especially our weekday programs, Monday through Friday. We do a little song and dance as well. Make sure you check those out wherever you get your podcasts, from iTunes to iHeart, Podbean to Stitcher, everywhere in between. And oh, by the way, become a WBAI buddy. Please go to WBAI.org. Say you like the Rick Smith Show, and we will send you a copy of Daddy, What's the Middle Class? And like I said, send a big enough donation, I won't even sign it. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1998. And if you tried to catch a cab in New York City on that particular day, you probably did not have much luck. The city's yellow cab drivers held a one-day strike to protest Mayor Rudolph Giuliani's new taxi cab regulations. 90% of the city's more than 12,000 taxi cabs stayed parked on that day. 2,000 cabs lined up along 14th Street and Avenue D in a demonstration of strength and a sign of solidarity. It was the first taxi driver strike in New York City in 30 years. The strike was led by the National Taxi Workers Alliance and their founder, Haravi Desai. After 15 years of trying to organize, the taxi drivers had just founded their union that February. The union represented workers from 85 countries, as many of the cab drivers were immigrants. The New York Times reported that city officials were stunned by the success of the strike. The one-day action showed the solidarity of the taxi drivers union. Today, the Taxi Workers Alliance represents 200,000 taxi drivers who provide an estimated 1 billion rides each year to New Yorkers and tourists. One New York taxi driver expressed the union's importance, saying, "With my union, I get the spiritual boost and the inspiration to overcome the obstacles in my track. I am a member of the AFL-CIO. It's a great feeling. Unionization is important for
for taxi drivers. They often have to pay steep fees for their medallion to operate their cabs, and fluctuating fuel costs can eat into their profits. Rideshare programs such as Uber are further eroding cab drivers' livelihoods. Organizing workers like cab drivers, car wash workers, and service employees is an important front for today's labor movement.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So this week, President Biden talked about inflation and a plan to try and do something. And look, I'll be the first to tell you, inflation is killing the working class of this country. It's harming everybody who works for a living. You go to the grocery store. Wow. The fact that Katie Porter had to wake up the Democratic caucus by going, I went to the grocery store and paid, and a pound of bacon was $9.99 a pound, and I had to put it back, to get them to wake up to the realities that families are struggling with. Kind of goes, Democrats, wake them up. The president came out and said, "Look, we're gonna do something. We're gonna do what we can on inflation, which is they want to try and lower costs on working families how they can. Lower prescription drug costs, do some things around gas prices that they can. As Stephen said earlier in the call last segment, the oil companies love the fact that gas prices are where they are. They could ramp up production. And this is where the big lie is. And this is where conservative, talk radio and the outrage factory, love to push disinformation. Biden has given out, and this is where the left is just beyond themselves angry. Biden has given out more leases than the last several presidents. Certainly more than even Trump gave out. The oil companies are just sitting on them. Because, they don't have to drill anymore. They love the fact that prices are where they are. They love the fact that they enjoy a monopoly. Because how else you getting to work? How else you going to get there, middle America? How else you going to get there from the suburbs? How else you going to get to work, man? How else you going to get to the soccer game? How else you going to get to wherever you're going? Because we've based our society on got to have a car. Now, in places like New York where you can use public transit, you got an alternative. But the rest of the country where there's no public transit, where I live, there is no way to get around other than you have to have a car. You got to pay what choice do you have? You can't even walk. It's so far. There's no riding the bike. So they've got you by the, they got you by the short hairs, man. And they know it. And if you listen to their earnings calls, if you listen to what they say to themselves, and the people over at the Groundwork Collaborative have done a great job of reporting on this. And it's not just the oil company, it's all of corporate America. They're telling themselves in their little circles that, we're using this opportunity to get fat and happy. We're using this opportunity to line our pockets. And this is where Biden is doing what he can. Understand, there's no switch in the Oval Office to go inflation on or off. There's no switch in the Oval Office to take on the business roundtable. Now, should Congress be doing more investigations? Where's today's Harry Truman? Where are the commissions to go after these profiteers? We should be looking into that. But he's going to do what he can. He's going to do what he can, lowering prescription drug costs, part of it. Doing something on student loan debt has to happen, and we can talk about that in a minute. I say the key of where Democrats need to focus, and you already know where I'm going to go with this, but the key focus should be in raising workers' wages. The key focus is giving workers the ability to collectively bargain. To me, that's the way forward. You go back to the 70s, and I think back to my grandparents. As inflation went up, their wages went up because it was in their contracts. And my grandfather, told me, and I remember this from years ago, that the one year they got like 5 raises Because as inflation kept going up, guess what? Their wages kept going up because of cost of living adjustments written into the contracts. And look, there are union contracts right now that are doing that. We need to get more people joining and forming unions, negotiating contracts that ensure that when inflation hits, you can go back and you can negotiate for better wages, hours, conditions, so that your wages aren't eroded by inflation. So that if inflation goes up, you don't care because your wages are going to go up. Now you go, but Rick, because you know whose profits go up? Corporate America. They're gouging our eyes out. Because to me, this inflation isn't the 70s inflation. This inflation is manufactured. This is corporate America being good American greedy opportunists. They see their chance. Now, Biden is also saying he wants to reduce the deficit. I don't necessarily care about the deficit. And I know some people are going, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. I don't necessarily care about our deficits at this moment. We've got some problems. We should be using money to invest in infrastructure. We should be using money to invest in healthcare and things that we need. We need to be creating those good jobs. We need to be making sure that we're doing affordable housing. You know, the fact that rents are skyrocketing and house prices are through the roof. We should be flooding areas with affordable housing like we did in my grandparents' generation. You know, the fact that they built little Levitt towns all across this country. They subsidized builders to build, modest homes, solidly built, modest homes that were affordable. We should be doing that, but we're not. And also the other big thing that we should be doing, making these big corporations pay, making the wealthy pay. We should be increasing the tax rates. We should have a progressive tax code that says, you know what, the more you're taking, the more you're lining your pockets, the bigger your haul from this economy, the more you're going to chip in to help pay for all of the other things that I just talked about. The more that you're putting on your plate, the more we're going to ensure that you share. Back to the old days of the cave. The bigger your shoulders, the more water you carry back to the cave. To me, it is really that simple. And what do the Republicans bring to us? What are they bringing with us? Well, they want to raise taxes on working families. They want to hit low-income workers. The 40% of the working stiffs who don't pay those federal taxes. Those slackers. The 47% of us who would love to pay federal tax because it would mean they'd be earning more money. You got the Rick Scott plan, who wants to destroy Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, who wants to destroy, all government programs. I mean, you look at the two sides, and for those people saying, but Rick, there isn't any difference between Democrats and Republicans. Oh, yeah, there is. And look, I beat up on the Democrats all the time because they deserve it. And because I want them to be better. I think they can be better. I think they should be better. I look at the Republicans and I don't see I see no hope there. And you look at the Rick Scott plan. Honestly, you look at Rick Scott's plan. Wants to destroy the Department of Education. Eliminate public schools. No, everything should be privatized. Name me something we've privatized that's actually worked out the way it was sold to us. They privatized turnpikes. They privatized the water and sewer. Whatever we've privatized. Tell me something we've privatized, that's worked out the way it was sold to us. Because we were told, we just give this to corporate America and we're going to get better services, more efficient, it's going to be cheaper. None of that ever happens. This is the craziness that they're seeing. Now, like I said, want to destroy Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. They've always wanted that. That's been the conservative wet dream since they started. No shock there. But all down the list. All of Rick Scott's 11-point plans, of which most of them are theocratic and jingoistic. But at the end of it, it's all about when you get to the nuts and bolts, when you get past all of the saluting the flag and swearing allegiance and praying and all of that stuff. It's about the money going from you and me to the very wealthy. It's about you and me still being desperate and pliable. It's about us adhering to the 996 plan. It's about us working from morning to night, 6-7 days a week. It's about us taking care of them and being responsible for them. That's the problem I have. Going to take a quick break right here. When we come back and take your calls, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Back after this. Stick around.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1968. That was the day that workers across Paris joined students in a citywide general strike. College students had begun an occupation at the famed Sorbonne University earlier that May. These students were protesting what they saw as governmental repression in post-war France. A story by NPR marking the 40th anniversary of the protests described the situation in France, where women could not wear pants to work and married ones needed a husband's permission to open a bank account. Homosexuality was a crime. Factory workers could be fired at will. The news on the single TV channel required governmental approval, and the overcrowded education system was authoritarian. The students protested French leader Charles de Gaulle and the police. The addition of workers to the protest greatly increased its scope and impact. Paris and much of the country ground to a halt. President de Gaulle was able to weather the protests and keep his political power. By the end of June, most workers had returned to their jobs, but the country would never be the same. The protests of that spring became known as the Social Revolution. It was a turning point in the nation's history, and institutions from workplaces to universities would undergo a liberalization due to the protests. One of the most lasting images from the strike was a series of posters, simple designs emblazoned with the slogans and demands of those involved. One such poster called people to strike, declaring, "Working now is working with a gun to your head." Another read simply, "Factories, Universities, Union."
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we've exceeded 1 million people dying from coronavirus. And for the most part, I think most of us have come to the position that it's over, even though North Korea has just said that, hey, they've got 6 people die, 350,000 infected. They're expecting, trouble. I don't know what to believe out of North Korea. But it'll be interesting to see where things go on that front. Let's go to the phone lines. We've got Joe on line 1. Joe, how are you today?
I'm doing great, but I'll get better.
How are you? So how are things in Minnesota, brother?
Oh gosh, finally beautiful out. The lakes have unfrozen. I'm ready to fish and bring the fish to the Rick Smith School.
We're still going to make it out your way to go fishing one of these days.
Oh, gosh, I would love to see it. I would love to see it. I thought I'd call in and give you guys a little Corona update. It's been a while since I talked to you folks. So about a month ago, I started seeing signs of a wave coming this month. And if things stay on their current trajectory, we're looking at about 1/6 of what we saw in January, peaking around Memorial Day. For your WBAI listeners, the peak will be a little bit later, just because of the large population. But there's one caveat. There's 2 new variants, BA.4 and BA.5, and they've started to show up in New York, less than 3% of the cases. And if those buggers take hold, this current wave won't be as big, but we're looking at another peak in the end of July and August, of about, again, 1/6 of what we saw in January. So this sucker is not over.
Yeah. Well, I think as a society, I think most people are mentally, until they get it, they're past it. And I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think that people are fatigued of it, and I think politically, I think everyone's moved past it, and that's I think it'll be interesting to see who gets harmed most by this, and I think it's going to be the poor and the minority community.
Yeah, you're correct there. And then the long-term COVID that, 3 of 4 kids have been infected now. We're just starting to discover more problems in the long-term COVID and chronic medical conditions resulting from that. So this is going to be with us a while until we all get masked and distance. It's that simple right now. And then when an Omicron vaccine comes out, we'll be a lot better off. So anyways, it's good to hear your voice again, and I thought I'd give you a little update.
Appreciate it, Joe. Thanks so much. Always good to talk to you, brother.
You betcha, brother. Take care.
Good stuff. Thanks so much. Sadly, however you see this, it's still be with us for a little bit longer. Let's go to line 2. We got Nancy on line 2 from Manhattan. Nancy, how are you today?
Oh, hi.
What's on your mind?
Am I on?
Sure. What's on your mind?
Okay. I hear. Should I turn off my radio?
Please.
Okay. All right. Oh, there's somebody else now.
No, that's just you.
I went to the rally at 14th Street, which was like the sister rally that was supposed to meet the other people at Foley Square. I was very disappointed in the speakers. There was no class analysis. There was nothing more than saying it's my body. We have our body. We have which is fine. It's true. So I approached a group of young women and asked them what was the meaning of this and who was against their using against women having abortions. And they really didn't know. They sort of tried to figure it out. And I think this it's not enough. If we want to have a really good movement on any level, there has to be a deeper analysis. So there was not enough content. But I want to switch now to something else which you said, which is you mentioned something about baby food. You alluded to how we're capable of organizing and how we didn't have to depend on the big corporations, which probably use junk anyway. So I agree. And when I lived in Italy many years ago and I had a baby there, my neighbor showed me how to prepare healthy baby food from regular food. What I'm trying to say is you're referring to a different kind of society. Corporate America runs this country, and it's all about profit without any consideration about the health of babies or anybody else. And we have to understand that. And I think it's dangerous to think that we can put our trust in them. And that I think we have to say it as it is, that capitalism is only interested in because American capitalism, late capitalism, is in trouble. There's competition from China that's having markets in Southeast Asia, in Africa, and they're giving better terms and they're doing well. And I think that this is a fight between the big capitalist countries. And I don't consider China a communist country, by the way. So I think that this is just about markets, and we have to understand what we're facing. You may put your trust in Biden, but beware, because he's not the big corporate interest and the military complex, and they decide how the politics are going to go and what they're going to do to dominate the world. So I think, just think of this: there are 60.
Go ahead. Did I lose you?
Yeah.
No, keep going. You were on a roll there, and then you stopped.
No, because Who's talking? I don't know. I put my radio back on. I took it off. So no. What I'm saying is, in your grant, you mentioned a lot of interesting things, and you said in your grandfather's generation, that there was a lot of accomplishment for the people. But in those days, and I know those days because I'm a senior myself, and my parents used to talk about those days. But the unions were strong, and the left was strong, and that's why Roosevelt had all those programs. He didn't want to do it. He wasn't a leftist by any means. But he had to do it because he was afraid the country would go socialist. Yep. God forbid.
Because the people were strong.
But the unions were strong. And all of those immigrants that came from all those countries, they had experience in their countries. They came here and they built the garment workers union, that union, and this union. But that's missing today. And you're right. You're so right when you say that we need to build the unions, because this is where workers, African Americans, Asians, whatever, any nationality, they work together and they struggle together. I was so impressed when I saw on TV the guys from Amazon, I think it was from New Jersey, and there were young people there, all races. This is what we need. This is what we need and the racism is the biggest drawback in this country. How they divide us, how racism play, and it's the same thing with the women's movement. They divide men and women. They exploit women to get over economically. It's all economics. It's all how they manipulate us. And this is the challenge. This is the challenge for us in these days. We have to organize workers against this corporate country. That's all I wanted to say.
Oh, you just summed up the whole 2 hours of the show. I didn't even need to do this, Nancy. Thanks so much.
Okay, take care.
That was a good book report. I appreciate it. That was perfect. That's the point. I mean, the point is the sooner we're empowered, and this is what the corporate America is so afraid of. It's the reason that Amazon spends hundreds of millions of dollars, and Starbucks spends millions of dollars, and Walmart spent millions of dollars. There's a reason they spend all of this money denying workers their rights. They're afraid of an empowered workforce and empowered citizens. You're so spot on, Nancy. Appreciate it. Let's go to the phone lines. We've got Audrey from Brooklyn on line 3. Audrey, how are you today?
This is Audrey.
Hi, Audrey. What's on your mind?
Hi. I was at the rally today at Brooklyn Cadman Plaza.
And how'd that go? What'd you experience?
I think it was fabulous. The weather was nice. There was a lot of people there. Very, very. I couldn't imagine a better rally. There was a great atmosphere. They had tons of signs, beautifully printed and colorful. We had marched across the bridge, and they had back and forth, chanting or whatever it was. But I think it was like a family. There was dogs and bicycles, and it's very, very interesting. I was 80 years old, and I was kind of afraid to participate, but I thought it was wonderful. So I didn't stay for the speeches at Foley Square.
You're 80 years old, and you're out in the street marching for women's rights? Is this what I'm getting? 80 years old?
If they don't do something very fast, I just don't. I don't know. I don't want to be around. I mean, it's just I never had an abortion. I don't, But I just feel so sorry for what's happening, and for the relations between men and women, and the stress that's going on. It's just too much.
So let me ask you this.
So I just hope.
What message would you tell younger women in this moment? Why is this such an important issue to you at 80 years old?
At 80 years, well, just for I don't even have kids.
Yeah, I mean, life lived as long as you have. You've seen things. You've experienced both when it was illegal and when it was legal. Why is this an important issue to you?
Well, it's so easy to get pregnant, and even and there's no instruction. They don't give it any instructions on sex or anything, and everybody is so, strong. They're so inhibited, and they don't tell you anything, and it's like, that's what that's how I see it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
And good on you for being out there in the streets. Good on you.
All right.
Thanks so much. Appreciate the call.
Okay.
No, it's fantastic. 80 years old out there fighting the good fight. Let's go to line one. We've got Denise on line one. Denise, how are we doing today?
I'm hanging in there, bro. And you?
I am fabulous. What's on your mind?
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank the two preceding ladies who were calling. Well, all of the callers, they were fantastic. Particularly the sister that spoke also about baby formula. I wish somebody would call in with a nice natural formula, rather baby food that we could make currently. I'm going to call.
My wife has the perfect formula. My wife has the perfect one. She'd be the first one to tell you that that there's the most natural formula ever made, and women are walking around with a pair of them.
Yes, formula and baby food, since we were speaking about baby food.
Okay. I'm hoping
true.
someone will call
That's
in.
Very true. Yes, if somebody would do that. And one other thing, I think that what women might want to do, particularly because of Manchin, Senator Manchin always wanting to cut everything that the Democrats try to put through, perhaps we should have a campaign of get Manchin out. And women should be calling, I think he's from Tennessee or something like that, one of the
West Virginia.
States. We should be calling sisters over there, and speaking to them about trying to get him impeached, because he doesn't reflect the wants and needs of his constituents.
Yeah, see, there's the
he
problem.
Doesn't want to do.
Yeah, here's the problem, Denise.
Mm-hmm.
West Virginia is a crazy state. He's probably the only Democrat in that entire state that's going to get elected. You throw Manchin to the curb, and he knows this, which is why he knows he's the most powerful person. What has to happen is in other states.
Anyway.
We need to this November make Joe Manchin irrelevant by electing people in places like Wisconsin, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in other states. We need to get.
But Rick, if you'll excuse me, there are senators that are Republicans who have wanted to vote and have voted and dealt with really seriously repercussions because of it. We need to make Manchin and anybody else understand, if you don't respect and if you don't reflect our wants and needs, we want you out. So if he thinks because he's making the majority of some nonsense of another, we need to, the women's civil rights movement for abortion, we need to come together and look at the representatives that are voting against our right to choose and get them kicked out.
I'm with you. Throw the bums out.
And we should be with the Republicans.
I'm with you. We should be doing that on every issue, Denise, on labor rights, on workers' rights, on women's rights, on all of this. This is where I want the most empowered citizenry we can get, of people standing with each other in the middle of the streets, just like we're seeing today in New York and 380 places across this country.
Yes, we are family, and it's not a color thing. It's not a sex thing. It's not a proclivity thing. It's not a religious thing. It's a human thing.
Amen.
So, let's get together. We got to breathe. We got to eat. We got to drink the water. Let's go. Thank you so much, Rich. You're the best.
Great stuff. I appreciate it, Denise. Thanks for the call. Please call again. No, this is the message. And this is the perfect place to end today's program on. Is the reality is that what the wealth class of this country fears the most is when we stop hating each other, when we tear down those walls, when we tear down those barriers, when we jump over those fault lines, when we do what past generations have been able to do, when they were able to do with the Bread and Roses strike, to be able to bring 20,000 women from various 20 different languages and get them to organize to fight for better wages, hours, conditions. What the Amazon labor union in Staten Island's JFK 8 was able to do across ethnicity, across gender, across orientation, to bring people together to say we demand better. That's what the wealth class of this country fears the most. When we realize that your fight is my fight, that we're all in this together, that an injury to one is an injury to all, that's when we can move forward. And as I said at the beginning, you know what? Sometimes we got to hold hands and stand shoulder to shoulder with people we may not necessarily like or agree with all the time. But if we're going to move forward and we're going to have better lives and fight for better futures for our kids and ourselves, it's what we got to do. And it's how we have to do it. And it's how our grandparents and great-grandparents built the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization. And you know what? It may seem dark, it may seem desperate, but we can do it again. It's that simple. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you missed any of today's program, make sure you grab the podcast. Always there, always available at thericksmithshow.com. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. And also, remember, become a WBAI buddy by going to WBAI.com. Quick break. We'll see you back here next time. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.